Well, welcome everyone. This is quite a turnout. Thank you very much for coming. By the way, before I forget, would you turn your cell phones off? We're videoing tonight, and that would be pretty good interference. If you do that, I appreciate that. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to summarize for you the entire course. All the important key teachings, what is more popular known as the course's metaphysics. So you understand exactly what the course is saying, exactly what the course is teaching. Now this book is 600 pages, and it's not the easiest material to communicate. So I'm going to have to ask that no questions until the end. I'm going to have some time for questions at the end. But if I'm going to get through everything, I need to go straight on through like that. So if you have a question, write your question down, and we'll catch it at the end of the talk. Okay? So whenever I do a talk like this, I can't help but think of the Buddhist monk that was visiting New York City. It was a beautiful October afternoon. All the leaves were turning in Central Park, and he was just really enjoying it. When he got a little bit hungry, and he saw across the way there was one of these, hot dog vendors with his cart. So he walked over there, and you have to understand, this particular Buddhist monk, he's kind of a jokester a little bit. So he says to the vendor, he said, make me one with everything. So the vendor chuckled at his little joke and got out a hot dog, put it on the bun, put everything on there, and handed it to the monk, and the monk handed the vendor a $20 bill. But he didn't give him any change. So after a minute or two goes by, finally the monk says to the vendor, hey, what about my change? And the vendor just smiles and shakes his head and said, no, change comes from within. Definitely change comes from within with this course here. So, like all great spiritual masterpieces, this course is written on many different levels. And depending on where you are in consciousness, you can get value from this course. And if you stay with the course, as you get deeper and deeper into it, you learn even more profound spiritual truths. So the course starts off and says that, by the way, I want to make one clarification on this. The word Christ here is the course's term for all of us, the whole sonship. It doesn't just mean Jesus Christ. It means everyone. Okay? So, having said that the course is written on many levels, we can also say the course is written on two main levels, which I'm going to call level 1 and level 2. And it's very simple, really. Level 1 makes a distinction between what is real and what is illusion. Okay? And what the course says, the only thing that's real is God, all of God's creations, which are all of us, not all of us as bodies though, all of us in spirit. Okay? And we're united in a non-dualistic state of complete oneness. So there's a line in the course that says there's nowhere where the Father begins and the Son begins. Okay? It's one united group. And this is what you have to get with A Course in Miracles, this non-dualistic state of oneness. That means once God creates all of us, God doesn't have an experience of His creations separate from Him, and the creations, us, don't have an experience of God separate from us. It's one total non-dualistic unified state. Okay? So, the Course goes on to explain that from within all of eternity, level 1, and by the way, level 2 is simply the practical way we put the course into our day-to-day life. And we'll be talking a lot about that tonight. Okay? So the course starts off and says, from within all eternity, which is this area up here, everything above the line is level 1, our true self. From within all eternity arose a tiny mad idea where the Son of God remembered not to laugh. What did He remember not to laugh about? The fact that we could separate from God. Okay? We believe we have separated, but in reality it's impossible because what God creates is immutable. So the separation never really happened, but we're having kind of a dream, kind of an illusion that it happened. Okay? So, like I say, it's a dream, it's an illusion, it's not really true. Okay? Like that. Now, the next thing you need to know about this is, once this seems to happen, we go from the capital M mind, the mind of God, to the little m mind, the mind of separation. And this mind of separation is composed of three parts: the ego, the Holy Spirit, and the decision maker, which chooses what he's going to believe in. Right? That's the three parts of the little m mind. The ego mind believes in separation, believes in individuality, it believes in our independence from God, it believes in specialness, uniqueness, and the world of opposites. That's this domain. The Holy Spirit's domain is a reminder of the truth of who we really are, that the separation never happened and we are at one with God. If the Holy Spirit could speak, what the Holy Spirit would say would be, what tiny mad idea? What separation? Don't you know it's impossible to separate from this oneness? And to remind us that the separation never happened. Right? That's called the atonement principle. Separation never happened. So, at this point, the decision maker has to choose what he's going to believe in. This way or this way. And unfortunately, all of us as a collective mind chose the ego. And believing in the ego system. So it's kind of like, a teenager. When a teenager kind of rebels against its parents and wants to do his own thing, that's kind of like the idea we got. We wanted to do our own thing, separate from God, and that's why we chose the ego and believed that we separated. But of course, we never did. Okay? So, the ego now, in a separated state, you might think, well, that's the end of the story. But it's not the end of the story, because the ego experiences threat. Okay? And what is that threat? The ego knows that it owes its existence to the Son of God, the decision maker, always choosing it, okay, over the Holy Spirit. And in any present moment, the decision maker can change its mind, see it made a mistake, and choose the Holy Spirit instead. If that happens, what happens to the ego? The ego's gone, right? Because the ego's not an entity in the universe, it's nothing real, it's just the belief system that we have going. And once we let go of that belief system and go this way, then there's no more ego after that. So, in order for the ego to make sure the Son of God never changes its mind, it has to devise a strategy to make sure this never happens. Now, this is an important part of the metaphysics you have to understand, okay? And this is what the ego does. It tells the Son of God a story. And the story goes something like this. He says to us, well, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is, yes, we have the separation. We have our independence. And that is great. But the bad news is, in order to get that, you had to kill God. You had to destroy heaven. Why? Because in heaven, there's no separation. There's no duality. There's no individuality. There's no world of opposites. Okay? So this has to go. So the ego puts this big guilt trip on us that we sinned against God. Now, whenever you think you committed a sin, what follows from that is guilt. All right? That's just the way we're wired psychologically. And anytime you feel guilty, what follows from that is punishment. I will eventually get punished for whatever I'm guilty of. Okay? So this is what we have in our consciousness now. This consciousness of sin, guilt, and fear. Right? So at this point, the ego tells us, you committed this awful sin against God. Now you know where all these fire and brimstone passages in the Bible come from. The ones where God, creates floods and destroys people and turns people into pillars of salt and so forth. That all comes from this original ontological story mindset that the ego has told us. Now keep in mind, none of this is real. None of this has anything to do with the real God and our real home up here. But this is within the dream, within the illusion. This is what we believe. Now probably the most famous of all these fire and brimstone stories is the Adam and Eve story, right? And I know you all know what happens there is Adam and Eve sinned against God. As a result, they feel guilty. They try to hide from God, anticipating his punishment. But finally, God catches up to them, right? And he confronts them, and he says, because of this awful sin against me, you'll never be able to get back into heaven, okay? You have to leave the Garden of Eden. And then to make sure they don't come back, he puts 2 angels with flaming spears at each entrance to make sure they don't try to get back in. Now that's a pretty horrific story. That's a pretty gruesome story. I mean, all they did was eat a damn apple. So there's a workbook lesson, number 96, that says, you believe you're the home of evil, darkness, and sin. Okay? That's the story the ego gave us. That's what we believe about ourselves because of this perceived sin against God. So, anticipating God's punishment, now we're very fearful. Very fearful. Just waiting for God to catch up with us. So we go to the ego and we say to the ego, help. And the ego says, no problem. I've got a plan. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to leave the mind and we're going to make up an entire physical universe. And God won't be able to get you there. Again, why not? Because God only exists in a domain of non-duality. All right? The world is a domain of duality, yin and yang, opposites, and so forth. And the ego tells us, we'll go there, and God won't be able to get you. So he convinces us that's the answer to our dilemma, and off we go. We project out of this mind, outside of time and space, and we make up an entire physical universe of time, space, form, and so forth. So this entire physical universe, all the solar systems, all the planets, everything, okay, was all made by the ego, okay, as a result of this defense that we're trying to defend against. This is the Big Bang. This projection out, making a physical universe, that is the Big Bang, the beginning of the physical universe. We end up in a physical universe, we end up in a physical body. And by the way, when the Course talks about the body, it's not just talking about the physical body, it's talking about your psychological and personality self as well. It's all part of the body. Right? So this is where we end up now. Now it's important to understand this other metaphysical point. As we descend down the ego's ladder, so to speak, we forget the rung before. So from the tiny mad idea, once we choose the little in mind, we forget about the tiny mad idea. Then in the little in mind, once we choose the ego, we forget we're a decision maker, we forget about the Holy Spirit. And then from here, once we make a physical universe and a physical body, we forget we're a mind outside of time and space. And we end up on the lowest rung of the ego's ladder. Now, the ego has achieved its goal, its strategy. It doesn't have to worry about the Son of God changing its mind anymore. Do you see why? We're now mindless. The world comes in down here, we forget the previous rungs, we don't know we're a decision maker, so how are we going to decide for something different? Okay? Brilliant, brilliant strategy on the part of the ego. So this physical universe is a huge distraction device or a huge smokescreen to ensure we'll never change our mind and choose the Holy Spirit. It's all part of the ego's strategy. So, this entire physical universe, the body, is a dream. It's an illusion. What I found interesting is the Course in Miracles is not the only spiritual path that teaches that, believe it or not. Okay? The Gnostics were very clear that God didn't create the physical universe and it was an illusion. Also, the ancient Vedic scriptures were also clear. They go back 5,000 years. They taught the same thing. Probably the most popular of all the Vedic scriptures was the Bhagavad Gita. Is anyone in here familiar with the Bhagavad Gita and has read it? Okay. Well, most of you haven't. So really quickly, what the Bhagavad Gita is, it's a story about a country that's about to have a civil war. And there's a soldier in the military there named Arjuna. And his spiritual teacher is named Krishna. So they're having this conversation. And Arjuna says to his spiritual teacher, how can I go to war and kill these people? Some of them are my friends. Some are my cousins. And Krishna's response to him was, why are you worried about killing them for? They're already dead. A metaphor for they don't exist. They're not here. 5,000 years ago, that teaching was there. Same thing in Buddhism. When I was in India a couple of years ago, Buddhism is probably the main religion there. Buddhism teaches the same thing, that the world is an illusion. As a matter of fact, Buddha, when Buddha walked the earth back then, and people would come up to him and say, what are you? Oh, I know you're a teacher, right? He'd say, no, I'm not a teacher. They'd say, oh, I know you're a guru, right? He'd say, no, I'm not a guru. And people say, then what are you? All he said was, I'm awake. What did he mean by I'm awake? He meant he was awake from this dream, awake from this illusion. And this is so commonplace in India. You know, when I was there, I'd have a conversation with a tour bus driver, and I'd say, you believe that the world's an illusion, right? And he said, oh yeah, like 2 and 2 is 4, you know? It's commonplace there. Here in the West, you tell somebody this world is an illusion, they think you're crazy and will lock you up. But the point I'm making here is the Course in Miracles is not the only spiritual path that has taught that. Okay, many of the great spiritual masterpieces have taught that as well. But the Course goes one step further than these spiritual masterpieces. This Course teaches us what the purpose of this physical universe is. Okay? And here's what it says. It says the world was made for 2 purposes by the ego. One, as you already mentioned, to act as a huge distraction device to make sure we never change our mind and choose the Holy Spirit. Now we don't know we have a mind. Okay? And the other purpose for the making of the world is to create all these other bodies. Right now we have 7.5 billion people in the world. So we have plenty of opportunities to project onto and judge other people. Because remember, there's only one mind. When we initially separated, we separated all as one mind, albeit an ego thought system. But if we're going to have someone to project onto, someone to judge, there's got to be something external to us, right? Because we're one mind. That's the reason bodies were made. Now we have people we can project onto, judge, and so forth. Those are the 2 purposes of the physical universe. Course in Miracles teaches us. I don't know of any other spiritual path that talks about the world in that way. It's a tremendous, tremendous insight, I think. Okay? So now the world becomes a battleground of victims and victimizers. Okay? Kill or be killed. Okay? So this doesn't just happen with human beings. Okay? This happens, you see it all through nature in this world. Like if you plant 2 trees together, sooner or later one tree will take more of the water, more of the nutrients, the other tree won't get enough, and the other tree will start to die. Okay? It's one or the other, kill or be killed. If you go to the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, You go there and there's this observatory with a huge glass bottom, like a glass bottom boat, and you can view everything down there in the reef. And they have a narrator in there. And here's what he says. He says, ladies and gentlemen, what you're seeing down there is one of two things. Either one species is eating another species, or a species is using their defense mechanism to try to not get eaten. Okay? That's it. I mean, this is the world that we live in when you look underneath at the basic fabric. That's the way this world is. It's a world of separation. It's a world of competition. It's a world of differences. It has nothing to do with our real home of non-duality and total oneness up there in level 1. But we try to find happiness here because this is all we know. Right? We forgot about this. We're living in an illusion. We know deep down inside something's wrong, something's missing, okay? But we don't know what it is. Also, deep down inside, people have like this mood of resignation. You know, they just know what's going on. But we try to have happiness here through what the Course shows us is an endless array of special relationships. If I can just get that new BMW, then I'll be happy. Just get that new job, then I'll be happy. That vacation home. Oh, this is a good one. If I can just get a special love partner to complete me, then I'll be happy. Okay? We're always looking for something external to complete us. Okay? But with the ego, it's never enough. It's like a bottomless pit. You know, you make a certain amount of money, next year you're not satisfied, you need to make more money. You have one car, you need 2 cars. On and on and on. Okay? The Course says there's only one way you'll ever find happiness, completeness, joy, and that's remembering that the separation never happened and who you are is really up here in level 1. So there's a story that kind of illustrates this point. I'll share with you. I really like it. The way the story goes, there was this elderly lady living in the woods by herself, and she had this beautiful stream running around through the back of her yard. And every day she would sit out there and have lunch by the stream. So one day she's sitting out there having lunch, and she noticed this sparkly thing through the water. So she reaches down and she pulls out this huge diamond, probably the largest diamond ever found. She looks at it and says, that's pretty. So she puts it in her lunch bag. Well, a little while later, this gentleman comes walking by. He's kind of down on his luck, you could tell. And she said, oh, hi, would you like something to eat? He said, oh, yeah, that would be great. She says, well, my lunch bag's right there. Grab a sandwich. So he gets the bag and gets a sandwich and sees this huge diamond in there. He pulls this diamond out and he says to her, what's this? She says, oh, that's a pretty diamond I found in the stream earlier this morning. And he said, wow. He said, well, can I have it? She said, sure, you can have it. So he takes that diamond, eats his sandwich, tells her thank you very much, and he is just elated. He leaves and he's thinking that all my problems are solved. With this diamond, I now have it made. Well, don't you know, a couple of months later, he comes back, and there she is out there eating her lunch, and she sees him, she says, oh, hi, how you doing? Good to see you again. He said, yes. He says, but I came back here to trade you for something. She said, you want to trade? What you want to trade? He said, I want to trade you back this diamond for whatever it was in you that enabled you to give it away. Huh? I think that story greatly illustrates our only chance for really joy and happiness is having an experience of our true self. Huh? Okay, so before we can continue now, you need to know the Course's position on time. And this isn't going to be easy because it's a little bit kind of intriguing. The problem is, in the Course, there's no one chapter on time. There's no one even paragraph on time. But what Jesus does, he drops these little tidbits from time to time that are very, very intriguing. Like, time was over long ago. Or, you're on a journey without a distance. What could that mean, on a journey without a distance? It's an oxymoron. Here's what he means. Let's say this line I'm drawing here is eternity, level 1, our true self. And we're rocking along in eternity. And when that tiny man idea happened, there was a little hiccup right there, and eternity continued on. What the Course is saying, all of time, the whole physical universe, from the Big Bang all the way to the end of time, happened in that one little tick right there. And all we're doing now is reliving all the possibilities of separation, form, and so forth that comes with the illusion and that tiny tick of time. The second thing is this. Some of you may know there was a channel named Jane Roberts back in the late 60s, and she channeled someone called Seth. And Seth said something very interesting. Seth said that all incarnations or lifetimes were happening simultaneously. What a fascinating concept, huh? In other words, there's no such thing as linear time. Time is more like holographic. And all we're doing in any present moment is we're choosing what we want to experience, like what kind of a lifetime or whatever. So what's happening tonight here, simply, all of you here tonight have chosen to be in Naples, Florida, at Unity Church at 7 o'clock, listening to this lecture. But in this present moment, you could easily be living a lifetime in ancient Egypt. You could easily be living a lifetime in Vermont as a farmer, because everything's holographic. You just pick in any present moment what you're doing. That's why the Course says we're on a journey without a distance, and time was over long ago. Okay. So what's happening in our life is this. It's like we had this huge video library in our mind, in our consciousness, of all the possibilities of separation and form. And all we're doing is we're just, everything's in there. You know, getting sick, hitting the lottery, abandonment, getting divorced, all the problems, all the things people go through in a lifetime, okay, is in this huge video library. And we're just picking a video and we're reviewing that, any particular lifetime or any segment of our life. But this video library has two wings. One wing has all the possibilities of separation and form, but with the ego's interpretation, and the other wing has all the possibilities of separation and form with the Holy Spirit's interpretation. In terms of choice, the only two choices we have is to see everything in our life either with the ego's interpretation or with the Holy Spirit's interpretation. Okay? So, let's take some examples. Let's say abandonment. So let's say I decide I want to view abandonment this lifetime, and I'll push this button on the left-hand side for the ego, and that's the wing of the library that has the ego's interpretation. Okay? Let's see how that might go. Well, the way that goes is you're born to parents who don't want you, so you end up in an orphanage. You grow up in an orphanage, you don't have any really good friends because you can't trust them. Later on in life, you get married. A couple of years later, your wife leaves you. And at the end of your life, you're sitting around the house looking at pictures of your kids that never come around to see you anymore. And the ego says, yeah, abandonment, play that one, this is a great one. Right? Let's take another example, divorce. Let's say we decide to view divorce with the ego, first of all. How might that look out? Well, that could be, it's Friday happy hour. You're going to meet your friends for a drink. You get to the happy hour, and you're going through a divorce, and you start right in, right? You know the drill. Bad-mouthing your partner. The reason we're getting divorced is because he did X. The reason we're getting divorced, she did, on and on, being a victim. You know how that goes. That's divorce with the ego's interpretation. But let's say I want to see divorce with the Holy Spirit's interpretation. How would that go? Two people are getting a divorce. One person says to the other, thank you very much for the 10 years we had together. We had some good times. I learned so much from being with you. And I really wish you well in your new path. And I hope we can still be friends and have lunch once in a while. Wow. Same divorce, two very different interpretations. This is all that's happening every present moment in your life. Whatever you're experiencing in your life, your decision maker is deciding, am I going to see this with the interpretation of the ego, or am I going to see this with the interpretation of the Holy Spirit? All right? So I want to make a distinction for you, an important distinction, between choice and option. Okay? On your spiritual journey, you only ever have two real choices, as I said a minute ago. To view your life with the ego's interpretation or Holy Spirit's interpretation. But in the domain of options, we have lots of options available, don't we? I mean, you know, should I take job A? Should I take job B? Should I marry person A? Should I marry person B? Should I live in New York? Should I live in Santa Fe? I mean, all these options are there. The point is this: what options you choose are totally irrelevant. They're all what Ram Dass calls grist for the mill. They're opportunities for learning lessons. They're classrooms. Okay? Doesn't matter what option you choose. What matters is what choice you want to bring in to hold that option, see that option with. Okay? So, we see this world right now as an illusion, as a dream. The purpose of the Course in Miracles is to teach us that we're a mind. We're a mind outside of time and space. Okay? But we really think we're this dream figure. You know, we think we're the person we see in the bathroom mirror in the morning. That physical, psychological personality self. Okay? The Course describes this person as the hero of the dream, and the dreamer of the dream as the decision maker that's dreaming the dream in the first place. So, other beings have been enlightened besides people like Buddha and Jesus. One, interestingly enough, was Shakespeare. Did you know that? Shakespeare used to say, all of life is like a stage where actors come and go with a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. That was his take on life. You know, same kind of thing as what the Course is talking about. When I did the S training many years ago, we were taught life is empty and meaningless. That idea. And even in the Course in Miracles, the first 15 workbook lessons, if you remember, talking about look at everything in the room and this has no meaning. This doesn't mean anything. This doesn't mean, right? And then about the 15 workbook lesson, it says, I've given meaning to anything I see. We add the meaning. See? Nothing innately really has any meaning at all. So, transformation or enlightenment only occurs on the domain of the mind outside of time and space. It can't occur down here in the dream with the body. Okay? All you're doing down here, if you try to attain transformation, is you're just moving the chairs around on the Titanic. Okay? It's hopeless. Because the only true solution is remembering the atonement principle and remembering who we really are at home. That's where transformation takes place. So let me give you an analogy. I really want you to get this, okay? Let's say you take your child or grandchild to a puppet show at the mall. And it's one of those puppet shows, you know, with the wooden puppets and the marionettes, they get pulled by strings and everything like that. And your grandchild's watching this puppet show, and the grandchild's mesmerized and so forth. Of course, you can't see the puppeteer pulling strings above, but this puppet show's going on. Now, let's say you don't like the puppet show for some reason. When the puppet show's over, you wouldn't go up to those lifeless wooden puppets and chew those puppets out, would you? No, you'd look up, find that puppeteer, and give him a piece of your mind. You'd say, I really don't think that show is appropriate for young children. There's too much violence in it, or whatever. Okay? The same thing is happening in our lives. We're down here as a bunch of wooden puppets trying to get complete, trying to be happy. And who's pulling the strings? The decision maker outside of time and space, and we're totally oblivious to this. See, we have to get back to this domain here to have any possibility of transformation happening. So almost nobody knows about this mind outside of time and space. That's the problem. I'll tell you an interesting story about this. When I was living in Asheville, North Carolina, about 15 years ago, on the cover of Time magazine was a picture of this professor, and he just won the Nobel Prize, and he was considered the top expert in the world on the mind. He was brilliant. Right? And it just turned out he was giving a lecture at the University of North Carolina, and I wanted to hear that lecture. So I drove 4.5 hours from Asheville over to Chapel Hill, and there's this big lecture hall, and he's giving this incredible lecture about the mind, the parts of the brain, and this and that and everything. And when the lecture was over, I went up to him. Everybody's filing out of the lecture hall, and I went up to him and I said, shook his hand, and I said, Professor, really liked your talk and so forth. I said, can I ask you a question? He said, sure, go ahead, shoot. I said to him, Professor, have you ever considered the possibility that the mind isn't in the brain at all, but rather exists in a domain totally outside of time and space? I wish you could have seen the look on his face. He looked at me like I was the man from the moon. And he said to me, of course I've never considered an idea as crazy as that. I said, oh, okay, just something I wanted to run by you. And again, thank you very much. I really enjoyed your talk. So I'm leaving the lecture hall. This is a huge lecture hall, and the exit doors were in the back. So I'm walking down the side aisle to get to the back of the room. And as I'm walking across the back of the room, I didn't turn my head to look back up at him, but I just kind of looked through my peripheral vision, you know? And he was just up there with his mouth open, just kind of staring at me, as if to say maybe, might be something in that after all. The reason I share that story with you is this. If the top Nobel Prize winner doesn't even know we have a mind outside of time and space, how is the rest of the average people supposed to know that? All of us. The answer is we don't. Almost nobody knows about this mind outside of time and space. Probably less than 1% of the entire population of the world probably has an idea about this mind. Okay? Yet, that's where, transformation happens. So, we all think we're the person we see in the bathroom mirror, okay? And we spend our whole lives thrashing around these options, trying to find happiness, trying to find completeness. And what's happening is the ego is using your life. The ego is using up your life. For what purpose? To maintain its own survival. That's the only purpose there. Okay? So the question is now, how do we get out of this mess? So if you're following along here and you're not lost, you should know the answer to that question. The way we get out of this mess is we have to figure out a way to access this mind outside of time and space that we're oblivious to. That's the only way out. How are we going to do that? Well, the Course has a process on how to do that. And what you do is you develop what's called the witness self, or the observer self. And what that is with a little bit of practice, you're able to kind of rise above your life, right? The battleground of your soap opera, and just observe and just watch what's going down in your dream. Watch your soap opera. Watch yourself having an argument with somebody. Watching some kind of a conflict. Okay? You can learn how to do this. This is not hard. Now, if you're down here in the dream, in this conflict, who's doing the watching? Can't be you, the person you see in the bathroom mirror. You're down in your soap opera. The observer self is this decision maker, the blue dot. Now we finally have access. We finally have a way to get into our mind that is outside of time and space. Here's the trick with this though. When you do this, all you do is observe and watch. You don't try to change what's going on. You don't try to fix what's going on. You don't try to stop what's going on. You simply observe. That's all you do. And you look at your soap opera with as little self-judgment as possible. Let me just read you something from the Course that illustrates that. This is important. This Course is all about looking at our ego. I'll just read this to you. It's on page 202, The Dynamics of the Ego. One paragraph. By the way, my teacher, Ken Watnick, went through the book one time. To look is in this book 1,250 times. So listen to this paragraph. No one can escape illusions unless he looks at them, for not looking is the way they are protected. There is no need to shrink from illusions, for they cannot be dangerous. We are ready to look more closely at the ego's thought system because together we have the lamp that will dispel it, and since you realize you do not want it, you must be ready. Let us be very calm in doing this, for we are merely looking honestly for the truth. Just in that one paragraph, the word look is like 5 times. So the idea is you observe and you look without doing anything else. You don't do affirmations, you don't do positive thinking, you just observe what's going on. And when you're able to do this, what happens is that creates a space in consciousness, an opening for the memory of the Holy Spirit to come through you. And that's how the healing happens. The Holy Spirit does the healing. See, we don't do the healing, but we need to get ourselves out of the way for that healing to take place. That's the crucial thing to understand. Just get yourself out of the way. Now, the other thing is, when we resist looking, when we're not really willing to tell the truth about ourselves, okay, that's what locks this in. That's what locks the ego thought system in. So we have to be willing to be vulnerable. You know, it's kind of uncomfortable to look at our dark side. So that has to happen as well. It's kind of like, you know, an alcoholic, to have any power over their alcoholism, they have to tell the truth about their situation. They can't like cover it up, you know. Oh, I'm not an alcoholic, I just have 6 drinks after work because I have a stressful job, or something like that. Okay? We have to be willing to be authentic about our own inauthenticity. Okay? That's very, very important there. Okay, so the next thing I need to talk to you about is, let me just, I have time to just share with you one of my processes and what I just told you about just looking. I used to be an Allstate agent, and I had an Allstate office many years ago. And one afternoon, right before closing time, one of my good customers called, wanted to come in and see me. I said, oh, come on in. But I also had to get to the bank across the street because the bank was closing. I had to make the deposit for the payments for the day. So I thought, what am I going to do? And I thought, I can do both. I can run across the street to the bank, make the deposit, come back in time to meet my customer, right? So I go to the bank, open the door, and wouldn't you know, the line's kind of long. I said, oh, no, not today. I still think I can do it. So I'm standing in line, and the line's not moving. And I look up to the front, and there's this nice elderly lady, about 95 years old, with this roll of pennies. 1, 2. I said, oh, no, please, no. So my irritation now began to turn to anger, right? But I said to myself, wait, I'm on a spiritual path. It's not spiritual to be angry. I need to fix this somehow. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll count my blessings. So I started counting my blessings. I started remembering my brother. We're very close. We're course students together. I had pretty good parents. Started thinking about them, you know. Had a good job, no money problems. In less than 5 minutes, my anger totally went away. So how do you think I did? Pretty good, right? From the perspective of most other spiritual paths, they'd say, Bill, you did great. From the perspective of A Course in Miracles, I failed miserably. Why? Because I wasn't able just to be with my anger, just to rise above and look at it without trying to stop it, change it, or fix it. In other words, I usurped the Holy Spirit's function. I said, I know how to fix this. I don't need you, Holy Spirit. I'll take care of this. So that's not the Course in Miracles. The Course in Miracles is to look, be with, without trying to change, fix, or do anything like that. Okay? Now, the next thing I need to talk to you about is the Holy Spirit. This is a biggie, because the Holy Spirit's function is quite different with the Course compared to other spiritual paths. The function of the Holy Spirit is simply to remind us of the atonement principle, the fact that the separation never happened. And the Holy Spirit is found up here in the mind, outside of time and space, not in the world. So think of the Holy Spirit like a lighthouse. You know, a lighthouse doesn't move around. It just shines its light out, right? Same with the Holy Spirit. It doesn't move around in the world, do things in the world. It just shines its light in our mind, the decision maker's mind. Choose once again. Choose once again. Right? That's the only function for the Holy Spirit with this particular path. Okay? Most spiritual paths, in one way or another, bring God or the Holy Spirit into the dream to make the dream a better dream, to fix the dream. This is not A Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles is not about fixing the dream, it's about actually getting rid of the dream, getting us outside of the dream. So, A Course in Miracles came out in 1976. In less than 2 years after it came out, there was a total big misunderstanding about the function of the Holy Spirit. People asking the Holy Spirit for, Holy Spirit, fix my bank account. Holy Spirit, manifest me a new car. Holy Spirit, manifest a parking space. Now, in Naples, parking spaces really aren't a big deal, right? But if you live in New York City or Chicago, and you have an appointment downtown, people go crazy over parking spaces. Holy Spirit, manifest me a parking space. Even Bill and Helen, who channeled this course, making the same mistake, asking the Holy Spirit, what corner should I stand on to get a taxi cab? Things like that, okay? That's not the Course in Miracles. So what Jesus did, what the Course did, instructed Helen to channel a whole addendum to the Course in Miracles to fix that problem. And that addendum is called the Song of Prayer pamphlet. I may have a copy of one here, I don't know. But it's an addendum to the original Course in Miracles, where Jesus in the Course clarified what prayer is from this point of view, what it means to ask the Holy Spirit. And this is how he did it. This is what he said. He said, when it comes to prayer, think of prayer like a ladder. And he explains that when you ask for specific things in the world, like BMWs and parking spaces and jobs and things like that, he didn't say that it was bad to do that. He didn't even say it was wrong to do that. But what he did say was, when you do that, you're on the lowest rung of the ladder of prayer, right here. And he said, it's fine to start your spiritual journey there, but what you want to do is work your way up the ladder to where your prayers become less and less petitionary and more prayers of gratitude, till you finally reach the top rung where you're once again reunited with God, reunited with your true home. Okay? That's the position of prayer in the Holy Spirit with this Course. Okay? There's a very important line in the Course that says, bring illusion to truth, not truth to the illusion. When you drag God and the Holy Spirit down into the dream, you're bringing truth into the illusion, the exact opposite of what this Course is teaching. Rather, you want to bring illusion up to the truth. Okay? So this is a big misunderstanding. Not only then, still is, amazingly, because what happens is most people who come to the Course in Miracles have come from other spiritual paths. to teach this Holy Spirit getting us things in the world. And they try to blend those paths in with a course, and see, that's a big mistake. You know, sometimes when I'm traveling around in different countries, different cities rather, I'll stop in a metaphysical bookstore and I'll ask the owner, is there a Course in Miracles study group in this city? And a lot of times they'll say, oh yeah, there's one at so-and-so's house, here's the contact number, and I'll go and I'll sit in on that study group. And it's amazing the misunderstanding that still goes on, asking the Holy Spirit for specifics, things in the world. I remember I was in this one city one time, and this young lady in the group was explaining to the class what she does is, when she goes to the supermarket and has to buy a cantaloupe, she asks the Holy Spirit, which cantaloupe is the sweetest one that I should pick? I promise you, the Holy Spirit has no idea what cantaloupes are. Because the Holy Spirit is in this domain outside of time and space, okay? It doesn't operate down in the world, at least with this path anyway. Okay? I'm not saying that other paths that teach that are wrong. I'm not even saying this path is better. I'm just saying this is a different path than the other paths. And the one thing I really respect about the Course is it says this is only one pathway back to God. It's not the only one, it's not the best one, it is a path. And you can get back to God with any path you choose. But this Course has a particular metaphysics to it. It's teaching a particular thing, and one important thing it's teaching is the Holy Spirit doesn't operate in the world. It operates up here in our mind outside of time and space where we can really do some good. Okay, so think about this. The Holy Spirit doesn't operate in the world because there is no world. And why would a Course that teaches us over and over again the world is an illusion have God and the Holy Spirit operating in an illusion? Better yet, why would a Course that teaches the world was made as an attack on God be about making our experience here in the world better? It makes no sense. Okay, so
the world was made as an attack on God?
As an attack on God, yeah. The story the ego told us in the beginning that I was talking about, we sinned against God, that kind of a thing. Okay, so now, if I was to sum up the main parts of this talk, key things I want you to get, what would they be? 4 things I've got outlined here. 4 key thoughts. Number 1, know who you really are, your true self as a level 1. You're totally united with God in a non-dualistic state of total oneness. Okay? This illusion of separation here is nothing but a dream. It's not real. Second point I want you to get is you're never upset for the reason you think. We think we're upset because of things that happen in the world or because of someone else in the world. Okay? That's the reason we think we're upset. The Course says no. Whenever you're upset, you're only upset for one reason and one reason only. You believe you're separate from your true home. That's why you're upset. Check out workbook lesson number 79 and 80. Workbook lesson 79 says, one problem, the problem we believe in separation, the one solution, the separation never happened, and the story. God is, and that's it. Third point, understand the purpose of the world, this physical world. You need to get very clear that God had absolutely nothing to do with the making of this physical universe. Rather, it was made by the ego for 2 purposes. To act as a huge distraction device, to keep us mindless, where we never get back and change our mind, and to have 7.5 billion other people we can project onto and say, they're the reason I'm upset, they're the problem, has nothing to do with me. And the 4th insight is our way home. How do we get out of this mess? We do it by developing the witness self, the observer self, that just looks without changing anything, fixing anything, and that creates an opening, a space in consciousness for the Holy Spirit to come through and the healing to come through. Now, Got a couple more things to do here. There's a line in the course, or say a paragraph in the course, that actually gives us the secret of enlightenment. And I'm going to read that to you as a close. But we're not ready to close yet. I'm going to take some questions in a minute. If you have any questions, write them down. But what we're going to do first is I'm going to give you a pop quiz. Most of you have been to college, you know about pop quizzes, right? And we'll see how you're doing. This pop quiz has only 2 questions to it, so not long. If we had more time, I'd make this interactive, because I'd love to hear some of your answers. But we don't have time for that. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you the question. I want you to think in your mind what the answer is, and then I'll tell you the answer, and you can see how you do, okay? All right, first question. Is the Course in Miracles about joining with other people? Question is the Course in Miracles about joining with other people? The answer is no. The Course in Miracles is not joining with other people, because when you think it's about joining with other people, you just made the error real. You're saying there's a separation and we have to fix it. We have to join with other people. Okay? The whole thrust of this point is to have a recognition or a remembrance that the separation never happened in the first place. So we don't need to join with anybody else. We are already joined. That's the idea, okay? All right, the next question. This is the biggie. This is, I don't know how many of you are as old as me who remember that famous game show in the 50s, the $64,000 question. Oh, yeah. Remember that show? This is a $64,000 Course in Miracles question. Anybody who gets this question right gets an A for the course. Here we go. Is the Course in Miracles about healing the world? Is the Course in Miracles about healing the world?
There is no world.
The answer is no. The Course in Miracles is not about healing the world. Rather, the Course in Miracles is about healing the mind that thinks there's a world out there that needs to be healed. Now, I don't know if you can get the profound wisdom in that statement or not. You may need to ponder it some this week. So I'm going to repeat it. The Course in Miracles is not about healing the world. The Course in Miracles is about healing the mind that thinks there's a world out there that needs to be healed. Okay? All right. Anybody have any questions for me? Yeah, Rich?
Mike, if you think it's valuable, where did the book come from? How did this even show up? And what's actually in that blue book? What's there?
Are you talking about the Song of Prayer book?
No, I'm talking about the Course in Miracles book.
Oh, how it showed up.
Yeah, how it showed up and actually there's 3 sections in it. Perhaps.
Yeah, okay. Yes, so for those of you who don't know, like the history of the Course came through a college professor, Helen Schuckman, and her partner, Bill Thetford. And what happened was, in academia, in that university, it was very, very bad relationships among the faculty, backstabbing, no one got along. And one day, Helen said, there must be a better way of relating. And after she said that, she started hearing this voice. And this voice in her mind said, this is a Course in Miracles, please take notes. And the entire text, 600 pages, came through as channeled material through her over a period of 7 years. Then, besides the text, there's a workbook where you have one lesson each day to do in the workbook. And then there's also a manual for teachers and a clarification of terms. Okay? So that's how it came about, and that's what it is. It's not a religion. It's designed to be a self-study, spiritual path for anyone who desires to be on that path. Right? Anything else about that, Rich?
And the person channeling it is Jesus.
Yeah, the name on the other side is Jesus. Yeah, Helen is the person here who heard the voice. The person in the Course is Jesus dictating to Helen the entire Course, the workbook and everything. Right? Who else had a hand up? Yes.
I'm just curious. You mentioned recently that Course is not meant to be combined with other paths.
Right.
Spiritual paths, that it is but one path.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how you reconcile the teachings of New Thought or unity with the Course, when a lot of the teachings of unity seem to be about manifesting and affirmations and prayer geared
Right.
towards the
Right.
lower rung of the ladder.
Right, right. So many other spiritual paths like unity, science of mind, and so forth teach the same thing the Course in Miracles teaches in terms of like the nature of God. All there is God. God is perfect love. There's no devil. There's no antichrist in the universe. A lot of those things are all the same with a lot of different paths. But there's also certain things with the Course in Miracles that is different than other paths. One thing, is like the way the Holy Spirit is used here is different from other paths as well. So, remember what I said. The Course is not saying there's anything wrong with, manifesting, affirming for a car or anything. It's just saying you're on the lowest rung of the ladder. And there's so much more available. We're talking about enlightenment is available. Transformation is available. And you're busy manifesting cars and parking spaces. You're using 1%, what's available to you. Look at it this way. You manifested this entire physical universe. All the solar systems, all the planets, time and space. That's pretty incredible. If you can do all that, what's the big deal about manifesting a car or a parking space? You see? That has nothing to do with, to me, being on a spiritual path where you're practicing forgiveness, where you're looking at your ego, you're looking at your projections, you're looking at your judgments. All those kind of things is working your way up the ladder. Okay? So it's fine to manifest a car or parking space if you want. It's not wrong. But there's much more available to you as you go up the ladder. Who else had a hand up? Yes, sir.
I'm an engineer, and this life I'm living has been manifested in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm manifesting this, why do I lose tennis matches? I'm serious, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I manifest something where I get the job all the time, I didn't not get the job, things of that type?
Right, right. Because another part of your ego is that you want to lose tennis matches, you want to get sick, you want people to steal from you and so forth and so on. Why? Because there's a huge payoff in it. Now you can say that he's the guilty one out there, not me. I'm a victim, okay, of the situation in the world. Losing this tennis match or getting sick or whatever. What it does is it makes the world and the body real. Whether it's something good that happens in your life or whether it's something negative, it still brings the focus onto the body. So the ego gets us either way, both sides of the coin. Anything else? Yes, Mary.
Could you speak a little to the Course's aspect on forgiveness?
Yes, on forgiveness. Okay. So, a couple of things I can say about that. First of all, in the Course, we forgive people for what they have not done. And that really sounds crazy, right? Say, well, this person stole from me. This person was rude to me. Okay? We're not saying you deny what happens in the dream. What we're saying is you get grounded in the truth of who that person really is. In reality, that person is still a child of God. Even though they're in the illusion like you are, even though they're experiencing lack like you are, so forth and so on, you forgive them for what they have not done because of the truth of who they really are. Now, the Course has 3 steps, 3 steps to forgiveness, process of forgiveness. Step number 1 is this. First thing you do is you realize the upsetness you're experiencing or the anger you're experiencing has nothing to do with the other person. So the first step is you withdraw the projection, the judgment, back from that person, back to yourself. That's step one. You realize the problem is not with that person, the problem is something in me I need to look at. Step two is you look at what it is in you, what you believe, and so forth, and you decide, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to choose the ego thought system. I want to choose something else, something more positive. The third step, you don't even have to do anything. If you do those first two steps, the third step is done for you by the Holy Spirit. You have an opening space now, the memory of the atonement principle comes through, and forgiveness happens that way. The other thing about forgiveness is this. It doesn't really do anything, as we're saying. You don't fix anything. Okay? So there's a line in the Course that says, forgiveness is still and quiet and does nothing. It merely looks and waits and judges not. There's also a saying in the East that says the same thing in content but in a different form. And I'll share that with you too. It goes like this. A fast mind is a sick mind. A slow mind is a healthy mind. But a still mind is a divine mind. So we have to stop what the Course calls the raucous shrieking of the ego. You know, this whole world, you know, is a huge distraction device. We're so busy, we're so overextended, we're worrying about everything, you know, and there's no way we're ever going to stop and contemplate the possibility of that. You know, the ego had a beautiful strategy of the making of this world, and, you know, it works. Yes, ma'am.
One of the questions that was asked in one of the classes I attended was about how you raise kids with this Course in mind.
The way you raise kids with the Course has nothing to do with the kids. It has to do with the parent, okay? With the parent getting grounded in the atonement principle and the truth that they really are. So, like, if you're disciplining the child, you're not disciplining the child with a place of anger, okay? You're at a place in peace, you're at a place in the atonement principle. Now, you still discipline the child. You tell them you can't do this or whatever, but it's not coming from a place of anger, that kind of a thing. The Course would say that this Course is not for young children. This Course is typically the way it works is you spend the first 35 years of your life being involved in things of the world, values of the world, you know, going to college, making money, being successful. The second 35 years of your life is involved in spirituality, questioning, those kind of things. So the Course is really meant for people in the second part of their life, you know, not so much the first part of their life. Yes, yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Now, I'm having difficulty with this illusion.
That's okay. Everybody does. I had difficulty with it for 13 years. So go ahead.
So now I have an illusion that you're talking and everything,
Yes.
and I have an illusion about all these people in the room. Are they having the same illusion as I am with you talking, or is this
Yeah.
just me having this illusion
Yeah.
and everyone else is, these people are, I'm sorry, all these people in the room are not real, they're just in my imagination.
Right, that's right. So they're all part of your dream. Okay, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Okay? Not only did you choose to be here tonight at 7 o'clock and so forth, but you chose to be with all these people here, and these people chose the same thing. But as I said, in any present moment, you can be in any one of those videos, you know, anything different. Another important thing, too, to understand is the importance of acceptance. The acceptance to be with what is, and not to resist. When you resist something, it stays stuck. You know, what you resist persists. So it's important to be with what is, and that's a biggie for us. And I'll tell you how I learned something about this. Many, many years ago, I was up at Omega. Maybe some of you heard of Omega in New York State, that center up there. I was up there doing a workshop, participating in a workshop with Ram Dass. And it was this about 40 years ago. And he was doing this workshop. There's about 25 or 30 of us in the workshop. And it was the last day, and we're sitting around in a circle with Ram Dass, and Ram Dass said, does anyone have any questions? And this nice young man raised his hand and said, Ram Dass, I live in New York City, and I hate living in New York City. You walk down the street, nobody's friendly, nobody even looks you in the eye, and the pace is there is very fast and it's very stressful. And not only that, the city's really not that clean. And he goes on to say to Ram Dass, and I hear you're moving to Santa Fe. And I want to move to Santa Fe and I want to study with you. This is what Ram Dass said to him. He said, well, it is true, I am moving to Santa Fe. But at this time, I'm not taking on any new students. However, if I were taking on new students, your first assignment would be to live in New York City. Okay. I want to give you, I promise you, okay, when will be the last question? And then I'm going to give you the secret of enlightenment. Remember I told you that, I promised you that. Yes, Wendy.
When you just said the acceptance to be with what is
Yeah.
that like the step 2 when you say to look
Yes.
at what you believe?
Yes.
It's just the same, it's kind of
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah, just be with what is. Don't have any pushback, any resistance, any judgment like I'm a bad person because I'm doing this or thinking this. Just be with what is. Just look at it. Right? Okay, there's a place in the Course towards the end where Jesus gives us the secret of enlightenment. All right? Now, in order for me to give this to you, I want to set a little context for it first. And this is the context. There's a very important line in the Course that says, I ask for what I receive, and I receive it exactly as I ask. In other words, we write the entire script of our life. Nothing happens by accident. Even before you're born, you choose your parents, you choose your race, you choose what country you want to be born in, you choose what culture you want to be raised in. Everything, nothing is left to chance. We script everything. That means that you can't say something like, okay, I guess I script my own life. But that bankruptcy I went through in '85, there's no way I asked for that. Or that divorce I went through in '96, there's no way I asked for that. And those parents I had this lifetime, I sure didn't ask for that. Right? No exceptions, everything. And the reason for that is not to produce blame for our shortcomings and mistakes in life. Not to produce judgment and guilt and so forth for our shortcomings. But the purpose of that is so we can take responsibility. See, once you think you're a victim, then there's no hope for a healing. When you think the problem is external to you in some other person or circumstance in your life, you don't have a chance for a healing. Okay? So, with that context in mind, I'm going to give it to you. This is on the bottom of page 587. Now, one word that Jesus uses in here is the word salvation. So when you hear the word salvation, that means the same as enlightenment. It means the same as transformation. It means the same as whatever Buddha was talking about when he said he was awake. To be in that state of mind when you're outside of the illusion. That's what this word salvation means. Okay? So let me go there. It's page 587. Okay, here we go. You ready? Jesus says, the secret of salvation is but this, that you are doing this unto yourself. No matter what the form of the attack, this still is true. Whoever takes the role of enemy and attacker, still this is the truth. Whatever seems to be the cause of any pain and suffering you feel, this is still true. For you would not react at all to figures in a dream you knew you were dreaming. Watch this one. Let them be as hateful and as vicious as they may. They could have no effect on you unless you failed to recognize it was your dream. Think about the most difficult person in your life. Why did you put him there? Remember, it's your script. You put that person there so you could say, I'm upset and it has nothing to do with me. It's that person. You put that person there so you could say, I'm not happy and it's not my fault. But, once again, for you would not react at all to figures in a dream that you knew you were dreaming. Let them be as hateful and as vicious as they may. They could have no effect on you unless you failed to realize it was your dream. So there you have it. I'd like to close with a quote from the Course, which says, if you really want to learn something, teach it. So for me, to have had the opportunity to be with all of you here this evening has been a real gift for me. And for that gift, I'd like to thank all of you very much. Thank you.